The conference room felt like a gladiator arena. 20 pairs of eyes watched as Brent adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. I sat in my usual spot, third chair from the left, completely unaware that my professional execution was about to begin. "We're implementing some team restructuring," Brent announced, his voice carrying that fake cheerfulness managers use when they're about to ruin your day. "Daniel will be transitioning to a support role due to some performance concerns we need to address." The words hit me like ice water. Support role. Performance concerns. In front of everyone. My face burned as 20 colleagues suddenly found their notebooks fascinating. Amy from marketing shot me a sympathetic glance before looking away. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Brent's smile was predatory as he continued detailing my new responsibilities. Basically everything I used to do, but with half the authority and none of the respect. My hands gripped my pen so tight I thought it might snap. The meeting dragged on for another 10 minutes, but I heard nothing. Just the sound of my own heartbeat and Brent's voice explaining my downfall to people who'd respected me yesterday. As everyone filed out, avoiding my eyes like I had a contagious disease, Brent leaned back in his chair. "We'll talk about your new role after the meeting, Daniel." I drove home in a fog, hands shaking on the steering wheel. The radio played some cheerful pop songs that felt like mockery. My phone buzzed with texts from coworkers, awkward attempts at comfort that only made it worse. The city streets blurred past as my mind replayed the moment over and over. Brent's smug face. The uncomfortable silence. The way Johnson from accounting couldn't even look at me. But as I pulled into my driveway, something clicked. This hadn't come out of nowhere. Brent had been circling me for weeks, maybe months. I'd been too focused on my work to see it. The signs had been there. The forgotten meeting invites. The sideways comments about fresh perspectives. The way he'd started questioning my decisions in front of others. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, engine off, piecing it together. This wasn't about my performance. It was about something else entirely. My phone rang. Brent's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Inside my house, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. If Brent wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules first. The first memory that surfaced made my stomach turn. A month ago, the budget meeting I somehow wasn't invited to. 1 month earlier, I'd arrived at work to find the conference room occupied. Through the glass walls, I could see department heads discussing quarterly projections. My quarterly projections. I knocked and entered. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was." "Oh, Daniel." Brent looked up with exaggerated surprise. "Didn't you get the meeting invite?" "I sent it yesterday." 20 minutes of searching my email revealed nothing. Not in inbox, not in spam, nowhere. "Must have been a system glitch," I said, taking an empty chair. Brent's smile was thin. "Well, you're here now. We were just discussing the finance department's timeline for the quarterly reports." The discussion continued without me. Every suggestion I made was met with polite nods and then ignored. It was like being a ghost at my own meeting. After everyone left, I stayed behind, ostensibly organizing my notes, but really just trying to process what had happened. That's when I heard Brent in the hallway, talking to someone in a voice just loud enough for me to catch. "We need someone younger in that position. Someone with fresh energy." My blood turned to ice. I kept shuffling papers, pretending I hadn't heard, but my mind was racing. Younger. Fresh energy. The meeting I wasn't invited to. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. The memo appeared in everyone's inbox 2 weeks later. Subject line: quarterly report delays, action required. I read it 3 times, each pass making me angrier. Due to delays in the finance department's submission timeline, we've had to adjust our board presentation schedule. This impacts our ability to demonstrate consistent operational efficiency to stakeholders. Delays in the finance department. My department. My reports. I pulled up my submission records. Every quarterly report for the past year, submitted early. Not on time, early. The latest one had been turned in 3 days ahead of schedule. I printed the email timestamps, my hands shaking slightly. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. My phone buzzed. HR. "Hi, Daniel. This is Kelly from Human Resources. I'm forwarding you a memo from Brent regarding report submissions. We'd like your comment on the matter for our records." My comment. I kept my voice steady. Just a brief response explaining the situation. Standard procedure when there's a performance concern flagged by management. Performance concern. There it was again. "I'll send something over this afternoon." I said. After hanging up, I stared at the memo for another 5 minutes. Brent was building a paper trail, creating a narrative where I was the problem. But I had timestamps. I had proof. I started keeping copies of everything. Not for revenge, not yet, but because something felt deeply wrong. Every email got forwarded to my personal account. Every report submission was screenshotted with timestamps. Every interaction with Brent was documented in a private folder I created on my home computer. It felt paranoid, but recent events had taught me that paranoia might be survival. Tuesday morning, I returned from lunch to find my computer screen still warm. Not sleeping, not locked, just closed to the desktop like someone had been using it. My heart hammered as I checked my recent files. Nothing seemed missing or changed, but the feeling lingered. Someone had been at my desk. I installed a discrete screen lock that activated after 30 seconds of inactivity. If someone wanted to snoop, they'd have to be fast. The next day, Brent stopped by my cubicle during lunch. "How's the quarterly data looking, Daniel?" "The board's eager to see our progress." "Coming along well," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Should have preliminary numbers by Friday." "Excellent. We're really counting on strong performance this quarter." After he left, I realized he'd been standing positioned to see my monitor. But thanks to my new security protocol, all he'd seen was a password prompt. Small victory, but it felt significant. "Close the door, Daniel." Brent's office felt smaller than usual. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, the hot seat, as people jokingly called it. I wasn't laughing now. "I need results, or I'll have to make changes." No context, no specifics. Just a vague threat wrapped in corporate speak. "What kind of changes?" I asked. "The kind that benefits the company's future direction." His fingers drummed against his desk blotter. "I'm sure you understand." I didn't understand. That was the point. Vague threats are harder to argue against than specific accusations. My work has been consistently. "Daniel." He held up a hand. "I'm not questioning your past performance. I'm talking about moving forward. New challenges require new approaches." I nodded and left, but something nagged at me. On his desk, partially obscured by other papers, I'd glimpsed what looked like a financial report. Numbers I didn't recognize. That night, I compared my preliminary quarterly figures with what I'd seen. The numbers on Brent's desk were different. Higher. Significantly higher. Revenue projections inflated by 15%. Expense reductions that didn't match our actual spending. Growth metrics that painted a picture of success we hadn't achieved. Someone was cooking the books. And it wasn't me. I printed both sets of numbers and laid them side by side on my kitchen table. Mine showed steady performance with modest growth. Nothing spectacular, but honest. Brent's showed the kind of dramatic improvement that would make the board ecstatic. The discrepancies were systematic. Revenue up, expenses down, profit margins expanded across every category. It was the financial equivalent of a fairy tale. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Tomorrow's department meeting included quarterly performance preview on the agenda. I knew what was coming. Brent would present his fantasy numbers to get everyone excited, then somehow blame me when reality didn't match the projections. But he'd made one critical mistake. The company's quarterly reporting software required my master login to finalize and submit numbers to the board. It was a security feature implemented after some accounting scandals at other firms. The finance department head, me, had to personally authenticate every report. Brent could create all the fake documents he wanted, but without my login, he couldn't make them official. I leaned back in my chair, a plan forming in my mind. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. The day after my public humiliation, I woke up with crystal clarity. Brent had played his hand, but he'd forgotten the most important detail. I still controlled the quarterly reporting system. Every financial report submitted to the board required my master login. It was hard-coded into the software, a fail-safe to prevent unauthorized submissions. Brent might have demoted me, but he hadn't thought to revoke my system access. I made coffee and reviewed my options. I could cooperate, hand over the login, and fade quietly into my new support role. Or I could remind everyone why the finance department had been running smoothly for 5 years. My laptop chimed with an email from Brent. Subject, transition meeting, urgent. I deleted it without reading and got dressed for work. At the office, I played the part of a defeated man. Head down, quiet responses, no pushback on the menial tasks suddenly appearing on my desk. Coworkers looked at me with a mixture of pity and relief. Pity for my situation, relief it wasn't them. How are you holding up? Amy from marketing asked during a coffee break. Fine, I said, stirring sugar into my cup. Just adapting to the new role. Her expression softened. For what it's worth, I think this whole thing is unfair. I appreciated the sympathy, but I had bigger plans than collecting condolences. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. Daniel? This is Michael Torres from Pinnacle Financial. I was hoping we could grab coffee sometime. The coffee shop buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd. Michael Torres sat across from me, his suit expensive but understated. I recognized him from industry conferences. Pinnacle Financial's CFO, our biggest competitor. I'll cut to the chase, he said after we exchanged pleasantries. Word travels fast in our industry. I heard about your situation at Westbrook. I kept my expression neutral. What situation? Daniel, we've been watching your work for years. Those quarterly reports, the way you've streamlined operations, it's impressive. We have an opening that might interest you. The offer was generous. 20% salary increase, full benefits, and most importantly, respect for my expertise. I appreciate the interest, Michael, but I need time to think. Of course, take all the time you need. He slid a business card across the table. One more thing. I'd appreciate discretion about this conversation. Industry politics, you understand. I understood perfectly. Absolutely. If anyone asks, we never met. I'll have to legally draw up a standard NDA, just to make everything official. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Leverage. Brent thought he held all the cards. He was about to learn otherwise. The NDA arrived by courier the next morning. I signed it immediately and sent it back. If Brent's people came asking questions, Pinnacle Financial was legally bound to deny our meeting existed. But more importantly, I now had an exit strategy. Whether my plan worked or not, I wouldn't be stuck at Westbrook forever. I spent the morning organizing files and backing up 5 years of financial reports to a secure drive. Not for sabotage, for protection. If Brent tried to blame future problems on my transition period, I'd have proof of exactly what I'd left behind. Around lunch, Brent appeared at my cubicle with his fake, concerned expression. How's the handover coming, Daniel? I want to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. It's going fine. Most systems are pretty self-explanatory. What about the quarterly reporting system? I'll need access for the board presentation next month. Here it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. That system requires special authentication, I said casually. I'll need to walk whoever's taking over through the security protocols. Great. Let's schedule that for this afternoon. Actually, the system's down for maintenance until next week. IT is doing some security updates. It wasn't true, but Brent had no way to verify it without admitting he'd been trying to access files above his clearance level. His eye twitched slightly. Next week works. 2 weeks before the board meeting, Brent called me into his office. His usual confidence seemed strained. I need the final quarterly file, Daniel. I looked up from my notepad with the confused expression I'd been practicing. Final file. The quarterly report. For the board presentation. Oh, that's not ready yet. Still running some final calculations. The muscle in his jaw jumped. What kind of calculations? Standard reconciliation stuff. Making sure everything balances before we submit. You know how the board is about accuracy. Brent's hands pressed flat against his desk. How long do you need? Hard to say. Could be a few days, could be a week. Depends on what the numbers tell us. I watched him struggle to maintain composure. He needed those files to match his inflated projections, but he couldn't demand specific numbers without revealing he'd already created his own version. Keep me posted on your progress, he said finally. Absolutely. Walking back to my desk, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. 4 or 5 years, I'd been the invisible worker keeping everything running smoothly. Now that I was controlling the timeline, everyone was paying attention, especially Brent. I ran the actual numbers that night at home, double-checking every calculation. Revenue was down 3% from last quarter. Not catastrophic, but not the growth story Brent wanted to tell. Operating expenses had increased due to some equipment upgrades and a small office expansion. Normal business costs, but they impacted the profit margins. The real picture showed a stable company having a slightly off quarter. Nothing unusual in business cycles, but not the dramatic success Brent had promised. I created the official report using the company's standard format, then did something I'd never done before. I locked it with a time release function. The file would remain encrypted until exactly 15 minutes before the board meeting. Only I knew the override code. The beauty of the system was its simplicity. If anyone asked why the file was locked, I could explain it as a security measure to prevent leaks before the official presentation. Perfectly reasonable and completely legitimate. My phone rang. Brent again. Daniel, I was hoping to review the preliminary numbers tonight. Could you send over what you have? I've got some draft data, but it's incomplete. I don't want to share anything that might be misleading. I understand your caution, but I need something to work with. I emailed him a partial report, accurate but missing key details. Enough to keep him busy, not enough to let him prepare for what was coming. Thanks, he said. This helps. But it wouldn't help him nearly enough. The rumor mill started the next day. I hadn't said anything directly, but during lunch with Amy from marketing, I mentioned that the quarterly numbers were interesting this time. Interesting how, she asked. Just different from what some people might expect. Amy had worked at Westbrook long enough to read between lines. By the afternoon coffee break, I overheard Johnson from accounting asking someone if they'd heard anything about the quarterly results being unusual. I kept my expression neutral and my mouth shut, but the seeds were planted. Thursday morning, Brent stormed into the finance room and slammed the door. Through the glass walls, I could see him gesturing angrily at something on his laptop. He emerged 10 minutes later, face red, tie slightly askew. Team meeting, he announced. Conference room B. Now, the meeting was awkward and tense. Brent talked about maintaining confidentiality and avoiding speculation until quarterly results were official. Everyone nodded, but the damage was done. The more he insisted everything was fine, the more people suspected something was wrong. After the meeting, I found a printed email in my inbox. Brent to the board, promising exceptional quarterly performance and significant growth metrics. He'd already committed to presenting the fantasy numbers, but he still didn't have my login. Friday brought the charm offensive. Brent appeared at my desk with coffee and his best fake smile. Daniel, I wanted to apologize for the way things have been handled. Change is hard, and maybe I could have communicated better. I accepted the coffee, but said nothing. Here's the thing. I need your help with the quarterly presentation. Help me out here, and I'll make sure your transition goes smoothly. Maybe even find ways to expand your new role. Translation: cooperate or face more punishment. I already have a role, I said mildly. His smile faltered. Of course. I just meant. The numbers will be ready when they're ready, Brent. I'm not going to rush the process and risk making mistakes. His eyes narrowed slightly. For the first time, I saw a flicker of real concern cross his face. He was starting to realize I might not be as defeated as I appeared. That afternoon, I received a formal offer letter from Pinnacle Financial. Better salary, better benefits, better boss. Start date: 2 days after Westbrook's board meeting. I printed the letter and tucked it into my desk drawer. Plan B was officially in place. Saturday morning, I composed my resignation letter. Dear Westbrook leadership team, after careful consideration, I have accepted a position with another firm. My last day will be date. I will ensure all current projects are properly documented for transition. Thank you for 5 years of professional growth and collaboration. Sincerely, Daniel Martinez. I scheduled it to send automatically 1 hour after the board presentation would begin. Whether my plan succeeded or failed, I'd be gone either way. The weekend passed quietly. I cleaned my apartment, caught up on reading, and avoided thinking about Monday's confrontation. Sunday evening, my laptop chimed with an email from the company's IT security system. Someone had attempted to access the quarterly reporting system using administrative override protocols. The attempt had failed, but the timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. Saturday. Brent was getting desperate. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I dressed carefully, my best suit, lucky tie, leather shoes polished to mirror brightness. If this was going to be my last week at Westbrook, I wanted to look professional. The office buzzed with pre-meeting energy. Board presentations always created tension, but today felt different. Employees whispered in clusters, glancing toward Brent's office where he paced behind glass walls, phone pressed to his ear. I worked quietly at my desk, reviewing the presentation timeline. Board members would arrive at 10. Coffee and small talk until 10:30. The presentation would begin at 11 sharp. At 10:45, The quarterly file would automatically unlock. At 11 o'clock, everyone would see the real numbers. At 12 o'clock, my resignation would hit everyone's inbox. By 12:30, I'd be cleaning out my desk. My hands were steady as I typed routine emails and organized files. After months of feeling powerless, I was finally back in control. Brent appeared at my cubicle at 9:47, sweat visible on his forehead despite the office air conditioning. "Daniel, I need that file. Now." 13 minutes, I said without looking up. "What?" "The file unlocks in 13 minutes. Security protocol." His face went pale. "What do you mean, unlock?" The conference room filled gradually. Board members entered with coffee cups and casual conversation, unaware they were about to witness a corporate meltdown. I sat at the far end of the long table, laptop closed, watching Brent work the room with his usual charm. He shook hands, laughed at jokes, and projected absolute confidence. But I could see the stress in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. "Morning, Daniel," said Board Chair Janet Hamilton as she took her seat. "Looking forward to seeing this quarter's results." "Should be interesting," I replied. At 10:58, Brent called everyone to attention. His PowerPoint presentation was loaded and ready. 30 slides of corporate optimism building toward the financial climax. "Before we dive into the detailed numbers," he said, clicking to his final slide, "I want to thank our finance team for their outstanding work this quarter." He gestured toward me with theatrical gratitude. Several board members nodded approvingly. "Daniel, whenever you're ready with those final figures." I opened my laptop and checked the time, 10:59. "They'll be ready in exactly 60 seconds. Confused murmurs around the table. Brent's smile became strained. "What do you mean, ready?" asked board member Caleb Webb. "Security protocol," I explained calmly. "Financial files unlock automatically at presentation time to prevent premature disclosure." It sounded professional and reasonable. It was also complete nonsense, but nobody questioned it. 11 a.m. exactly. My laptop chimed softly as the quarterly file unlocked. "There we go," I said, connecting to the room's projection system. Brent stepped aside, but I caught the panic in his eyes. He had no idea what was coming. The first slide appeared. Q3 Financial Summary, Westbrook Industries. As you can see, I began in the same tone I'd used for dozens of presentations. This quarter presents some interesting challenges. Revenue, down 3.2% from Q2. Operating expenses, up 1.8% due to planned infrastructure investments. Net profit, $2.1 million, compared to $2.4 million last quarter. The numbers were perfectly respectable for a company our size, but they weren't the explosive growth Brent had been promising for weeks. Silence filled the room like fog. Board member Janet Hamilton leaned forward. "These figures seem quite different from the preliminary projections we discussed, Brent." Brent's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. There must be some mistake. "Daniel, these aren't the numbers we reviewed." I clicked to the next slide. A comparison chart showing projected versus actual performance. "Actually, these are the only numbers I've prepared. The projections you're referring to didn't come from the finance department." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Board members exchanged glances while Brent's face cycled through various shades of red. "Daniel, obviously there's been some miscommunication." "No miscommunication," I said, advancing to the next slide. "These figures reflect our actual financial position based on verified transactions and standard accounting practices." Janet Hamilton turned to Brent with the expression of a mother who'd caught her teenager lying about homework. "Brent, you assured us this quarter would show significant growth. You've been referencing specific numbers for weeks." "I was working from preliminary projections. Based on what data?" The question came from Caleb Webb, whose accounting background made him particularly dangerous in moments like this. Brent stammered about optimistic forecasting and growth trajectories, but he was drowning in his own lies. I clicked to my final slide, a timeline showing when various reports and projections had been created and by whom. The fake numbers Brent had been circulating were dated 2 weeks before I'd even finished collecting the raw data. Mathematically impossible and provably fraudulent. Board member Pearl Cole leaned back in her chair with a disgusted expression. "Are you telling us you've been presenting fabricated projections to this board?" Brent's collapse was spectacular. His carefully constructed confidence crumbled as he tried to explain away the unexplainable. I was trying to be optimistic about our growth potential. You were lying, Janet Hamilton said flatly. These aren't optimistic projections. They're falsified documents. I remained silent, letting the board members draw their own conclusions. The evidence spoke for itself. Caleb Webb pulled out his phone and began taking photos of my presentation slides. Daniel, how long have you been aware of these discrepancies? I only became fully aware of the extent of the problem when I ran the final numbers, I said truthfully. And you didn't think to alert anyone? I'm alerting you now. Pearl Cole turned to Brent with ice in her voice. Do you have any explanation for why your projections bear no resemblance to reality? Brent tried one last desperate play. Daniel has been resistant to new approaches. I was trying to present a more forward-thinking perspective. By fabricating data, Janet Hamilton's tone could have frozen lava. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the scratching of pens as board members took notes. Finally, Janet spoke. Brent, I think it would be best if you stepped out while we discuss this situation. Security arrived 15 minutes later. Not building security, corporate security. The kind that escorts terminated executives to their cars and makes sure they don't take anything that doesn't belong to them. Brent walked past me without making eye contact, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. His office would be locked and sealed within the hour. Daniel, could you stay behind for a moment? Janet Hamilton asked as other board members filed out. When the room emptied, she closed the door and sat back down. That was quite a presentation. I just showed the numbers. You did more than that. You protected this company from making decisions based on false information. She paused, studying my face. How long have you suspected Brent was manipulating data? I considered my answer carefully. Long enough to start documenting everything. Smart. We're going to need those records for the internal investigation. She leaned forward, hands clasped. I'll be direct. We'd like you to step into Brent's role on an interim basis while we conduct a formal search. The offer I'd been expecting. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance. I appreciate the confidence, but I've already accepted another position. Her eyebrows rose. When this morning's events confirmed it was the right decision. My phone buzzed constantly as news of Brent's termination spread through the office. 23 unread messages from coworkers wanting details, gossip, or just to express amazement that quiet Daniel from finance had orchestrated the downfall of their least favorite manager. I ignored them all except one from Amy in marketing. Holy shit, Daniel. You're a legend. At 12 p.m. exactly, my resignation email was sent automatically. I watched my inbox explode with responses, surprise, congratulations, and more than a few, I wish I had your courage messages. The phone call came at 12:17. Daniel? This is Brent. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. What can I do for you, Brent? His voice was small, defeated. All the arrogance stripped away, leaving something that almost resembled humility. I'm going to need a reference. For future opportunities. The audacity was breathtaking. The man who'd publicly humiliated me, tried to frame me for his own failures, and attempted to steal credit for years of my work was asking for a favor. A reference. Yes. Look, I know things got complicated, but we worked together for 5 years. Surely you can. Brent, I interrupted, keeping my voice calm and professional. I only give references for people I've actually worked with. I spent my final hour at Westbrook cleaning out my desk and accepting congratulations from coworkers who suddenly remembered my 5 years of reliable service. The cardboard box contained surprisingly little: a coffee mug, a desk plant, some personal files, and a photo from the company picnic 3 years ago. Back when I'd still believed loyalty and hard work would be rewarded. Amy from marketing appeared as I was taping the box shut. So what's next for the legendary Daniel Martinez? New job, fresh start. Sometimes that's all you need. Are you going to miss this place? I looked around the office where I'd spent 5 years of my life. The cubicle where I'd eaten countless lunches. The conference room where I'd presented dozens of quarterly reports. The copy machine I'd fixed more times than IT. I'm going to miss the good parts, I said honestly. Janet Hamilton approached as I headed toward the elevator. Daniel, I want you to know the board appreciates your integrity today. If you ever reconsider our offer, the door is always open. Thank you. That means more than you know. The elevator doors closed, and I descended toward the lobby for the last time as a Westbrook employee. In 12 hours, I'd gone from demoted middle manager to corporate whistleblower to new job holder. Not bad for a day's work. The parking garage was quiet, just the echo of my footsteps and the distant hum of traffic. I loaded my box into the trunk and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, processing what had just happened. My phone rang. Michael Torres from Pinnacle Financial. Daniel, I don't know what you did over there, but the industry is buzzing. Ready to start Monday instead of next week. Actually, I think I'll take the weekend to decompress first. Fair enough. But seriously, welcome to the team. I have a feeling you're going to fit in perfectly here. After hanging up, I started the engine and pulled out of the parking garage into the afternoon sunshine. The city looked different somehow, brighter, full of possibility. At the first red light, I rolled down the windows and turned up the radio. A classic rock song was playing, something about taking chances and breaking free. For the first time in months, I felt completely, genuinely happy. Behind me, Westbrook Industries was probably in full crisis mode. Emergency board meetings, damage control, internal investigations. They'd survive, companies usually do, but they'd learned an important lesson about underestimating the quiet ones. 3 months later, I was settled into my new role at Pinnacle Financial when Amy from marketing sent me a LinkedIn article. Former Westbrook executive faces fraud charges in financial reporting scandal. Brent's mugshot stared back from the screen, looking haggard and defeated. The investigation had uncovered not just the falsified quarterly reports, but a pattern of financial manipulation going back 2 years. The article quoted Janet Hamilton. This incident reinforced the importance of ethical leadership and the courage of employees who speak up when they see wrongdoing. I forwarded the article to Michael Torres with a simple message, "Glad I made the right choice." His response came back within minutes. "We're glad you did too." That evening, I walked through my new neighborhood, past coffee shops and bookstores I was still discovering. The air was crisp, autumn leaves crunching under my feet. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Daniel, this is Brent. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. You deserved better." I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations belonged in the past. At home, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop to review next quarter's projections for Pinnacle. Real numbers, honest analysis, ethical leadership. Exactly the way business should be done. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in years, the future looked bright.